Have you ever had a moment where you finally understood what was holding you back? Maybe you recognized a limiting belief you had. Maybe you realized you had been comparing yourself to others. Maybe you also became aware of a pattern that had been influencing your decisions for years. And for a moment, for just a moment, it felt like everything just clicked for you. You could see it. You could actually understand it. You also knew exactly what was happening and what was holding you back. But then something unexpected occurred. Nothing changed. You still made many of the same decisions you did before. You still felt stuck in the same places that you did before you were aware of these things. You still found yourself repeating some of the same patterns. Now, if you've ever experienced that, I've said this before, you are not alone because awareness is powerful, but awareness alone is rarely enough. And that realization is what eventually led me to develop a concept. It is that concept called the alignment gap. I've said this in some of my other videos. The alignment gap is that space between what we know and how we live. It's that distance between our awareness and our actions, between our intentions and our decisions, between who we want to become and those patterns that continue to shape our lives. So, over the past several weeks, we have been exploring what I call the hidden biases. And these are those mental patterns that are quietly influencing how we think, how we interpret situations, and how we actually make decisions. We talked about negativity bias, and that was the tendency to focus more on what's wrong than what is actually working for us. We also talked about confirmation bias, and that bias was the tendency to look for evidence that supports what we already believe, but while we're overlooking information that is actually challenging us and challenging those beliefs. We explored the comparison trap or comparison bias, which is the habit of measuring our progress against somebody else's journey rather than our own journey. We talked about survivorship bias. And survivorship bias is that tendency to compare ourselves to visible success stories while we are overlooking all the unforeseen realities or unseen realities behind all of those success stories. And finally, we discussed status quo bias. And that is the powerful pull towards staying where we are because familiar, well, it feels safer than actually making a change. Now, here is what is truly fascinating. Most people can recognize these patterns once they are explained to them. They can start seeing them themselves. They can identify them. They can even point to examples in their own lives where it's happened. But recognition doesn't automatically create that transformation for us. And that is where many people really start to become frustrated because they just assume that awareness should be enough. They start to think, now that I know what is happening, I should be able to change. I should be able to change everything. But human behavior doesn't really work that way. I want you to think about it this way. So most people know that they should exercise, right? It's healthy, it's good for you. Most people know that they should manage their stress in their life. It is also good for us. Most people know that they should get enough sleep. But awareness isn't usually the problem. Here's the challenge. The challenge is translating that awareness into consistent action. The same thing happens with these hidden biases that we just went over. You can know that negativity bias exists and still focus on all of your shortcomings. You can understand confirmation bias and still believe stories about yourself that are no longer true for you. You can also recognize that darn comparison trap and still feel behind when you scroll through all those social media posts. You can understand status quo bias as well and still hesitate to make that needed change because awareness addresses knowledge. But transformation requires alignment. And that is exactly where that alignment gap begins to emerge. The more I have worked with women entrepreneurs, the more I have worked with professionals, the more I have worked with leaders, the more I have noticed something very interesting. Many of them were incredibly self aware. They knew what they valued, they knew what they wanted, they understood what was holding them back. And yet they still felt disconnected from the life the business, or even the impact they were trying to create. Now, at first, that seemed contradictory. Tough word here. If they were so aware, why weren't they experiencing the results that they actually wanted? Well, the answer was not a lack of knowledge. The answer was really what was misaligned. They were making decisions that didn't fully support what they said truly mattered most in their lives and in their business. Not intentionally, but gradually, subtly, and often unconsciously. And that's exactly what hidden biases do. Hidden biases will create that small misalignment over time. Negativity bias is going to pull your focus towards problems instead of those possibilities. Or confirmation bias is going to reinforce those stories that may no longer serve you. Or comparison bias is going to shift your attention away from your own path. And survivorship bias is going to create unrealistic expectations for you. And status quo bias keeps you attached to what is familiar. Now, individually, these patterns, well, they may seem very small, but collectively, they can create a significant gap between where you are and where you are capable of being. And the longer these patterns operate unnoticed, the wider this gap is going to become for you. So here is what I've discovered is that closing the alignment gap requires more than just awareness. It also requires intentional alignment. It requires regular examining whether your decisions are connected to your values, whether your actions are actually supporting the goals you have set for yourself, whether your priorities reflect what actually matters to you, and whether the life that you are building is aligned with the person who you are becoming. Because awareness will answer this question: what is happening? Where alignment is going to answer a different question. Alignment is going to answer the question, what am I going to do about it? And that distinction will change things for you. When people begin focusing on alignment rather than just simply awareness, their decisions will start to shift. They will start to become more intentional in their decisions, more focused in their decisions, more confident as well. And not because life becomes easier. That's not what it is. It's because their actions actually become more connected to their purpose. And that's going to start creating momentum for you. And this is why I believe so many women today are not struggling. They're not struggling because they lack information. Most have more information than they've ever had before quickly available to us. They're listening to podcasts. We are reading books, taking courses, learning new strategies. But here's the challenge. Like I said, the challenge isn't all that information. The challenge is integration of that information. It's taking what they know and bringing it into alignment with how they live, how they lead, and how they are making decisions. And that is where transformation is going to start to happen, not in the awareness alone, but in the alignment. So if there is one thing that I want you to take away from this video on the alignment gap, it is this: awareness is only the beginning. It is not the destination. Recognizing those hidden patterns that are influencing your life is incredibly valuable. But lasting change, well, that is going to happen when awareness is followed by intentional action. So when insight becomes alignment, when understanding starts to become decision making, when knowledge becomes practice. Because the greatest gap that most people face isn't a lack of potential. The most thing they face is the space that is between what they already know and what they are consistently doing. And that space is what I do call the alignment gap. So for more resources on the alignment gap, you can visit my website at michelleegbert.com. Under the alignment series, there are three free resources for you to explore, and I will see you next time.